Welcome to Behind the Bookshelf podcast. I'm your host, Emily Vale. This is a place where we hold a candle flame to pages, get the inside scoop from published authors and other industry professionals. Here you'll learn the inspiration behind their stories, get to know the author, learn their process, and be part of relevant conversations around literature. So take a seat, grab a book. We're going behind the bookshelf. Thank you, Andrew, for joining Behind the Bookshelf podcast. You're my first guest, actually.
I am honored.
Yeah, well, I'm honored to have you. I'm really, when I first came across your profile and your books, your branding is on point, and it really drew me in. So I'm excited to talk about Fang Gloria. So let me introduce you real quick. I'm going to do a short bio just for everybody who may not be familiar with you. I'm joined by author A.M Wiley, who is known for his thrilling YA horrors flooded with plenty of nostalgia. He is a self-proclaimed movie buff, rollerblader, and nostalgia junkie who spends his time digging through the crypts of local used bookstores or reminiscing to his wife and 3 sons about the good old days. So again, thank you. And you had your release was yesterday.
Yes. Yeah. So the book released yesterday, which is kind of surreal because you spend, a year writing it and this mad rush all of a sudden, like in the last few weeks, like trying to get it out and make sure that everything is ready to go. And then the day arrives and everything's quiet. You're waiting for something to explode, like after everything you've been doing. And you just kind of go through your day. I went to work. I work at the National Institutes of Health. I'm a video producer there. So just went to work doing my thing. And, but at the same time, you have this thing happening that you're really excited about. And then it kind of passes by and you're like, okay, all right, on to the next book, right?
And you knew, because this wasn't the first book that you published, so you kind of anticipated maybe how the release feels and how it would go, right?
Yeah, although this one was unique because so I have 4 full-length novels and then a short story that I've put out. And my wife and I talk about how we've kind of built the plane while we've been flying. So it's like I wrote the first novel, which was called Weird Space, and it's the first of a trilogy without having any social media presence, without even really having any plan in terms of publishing. I really just wrote the novel for me. I was planning it out and writing it during the pandemic, and then kind of as we were coming out of it, almost therapeutically. And then got to a point where I kind of thought, you know what? I really love this. Like, this is pouring my heart out. This is capturing my childhood. And as an adult, looking back on that and what I think now and everything I've learned and how much I love, the past and what I got to experience and the people that I got to experience it with. And I thought, I want to share that with others. And I'd also spent a lot of time submitting query letters through the traditional publishing route. So many years collecting lots of rejection notices. It's the standard story. And so I had always thought, well, I always have to wait until the gatekeepers let me in and tell me I'm good enough or in a good mood that day and happen to take my manuscript. And then started learning about indie publishing and thought, you know what, let me put it out to readers. And if I'm not a good writer or if my stories just aren't really hitting or resonating, I'll find out because no one will buy books, no one will respond, or they will and they'll tell me, right? They're not, it's not my mom or my wife or my kids where they're like, yeah, dad, it's great. These are people that have no obligation to tell me anything if it's good or not. So anyway, long story short, no, Fang Gloria it's not the first release, but it is the first time I'm releasing a book where I actually have a better idea of how to kind of launch a book.
Yeah.
All the others have just been throwing it out to the ether and hoping and praying that somebody reads it or finds it. This one I was really just so grateful because this wonderful community of people like yourself, people that on Bookstagram and Book Talk, who are just lovers of great stories and authors, they're just incredibly generous. And so a lot of them have come alongside me and they've said, when you put out your next book, we're here. We'll help put it out. We'll help amplify it. Let's book swap. I'll take yours. You take mine. We'll both share about them in our newsletters and on social media. So it's been a very different experience putting Fang Gloria out and all of a sudden realizing I have this wonderful community of people that are there to experience that with me and really help get the word out.
I'm glad you say that because I just released my first book about a month ago, and
That's
I didn't have
awesome.
any huge like expectations for it. But I've been learning that, like, for me at least, I'm treating this release as my introduction and kind of like gaining entry to this community and letting it serve as a lesson to me. Like you said, building, like learning how to fly a plane as you're building it or something like that. So
Yeah.
I very much relate to that. And so, like you, I feel like I'm better equipped to move on to my next thing. Um, but I would never have known that you didn't have like a solid marketing plan for Weird Space. I mean, obviously you built it over time, but everything just like looks so good and put together, and I could look at your stuff and automatically like recognize that it came from you. So you're doing a good job.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. And I have to give all props to my brother. So I find that most of us have some advantage somewhere, right? And I think that in my case, my brother Dan, who is a professional artist, video producer, all of these things, and so he's been doing incredible artwork all of his life, and he agreed to come on and help me with all of my covers. So if they all have that common look, it's because I put together a whole Pinterest page for him for every book that I do, and I just say, here's kind of the idea. What can you do with it? And he comes back, several weeks later with something better than I could have imagined. And so it's all him, really. I mean, he gives these things these incredible looks, and I don't know where I'd be without him.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did because of previous conversations. I reached out to you and was like, "Who does your cover?" And you told me. So I did want to say, yeah, they're to die for. And
Thank
so
you.
they give like a very cinematic feel to me to the stories. Like they could be movie posters. And so I wanted to kind of like ask a question based on that. Do you write cinematically? Like, do you envision your stories as movies playing out while you write them?
Entirely. So I spent a large swath of my writing journey as a screenwriter, and so not in a I'm a working screenwriter kind of way. I did go out to LA for a summer and went through a screenwriting workshop, but then spent a good like 6 years. I moved back here, and then with a friend who was living out in LA, put a screenplay together, met with a producer, and we were actually able to pitch it to different studios, just like the trad publishing world collected rejections. But what I did learn over the course of that time is that I don't love screenwriting, but I do think cinematically, like you're saying. And I picked up a lot about how I structure my novels from how I structured screenplays. So, three-act structure. I don't know if you've ever seen the Save the Cat book series where they have the 15 beats in the beat sheet, but all of these things kind of really helped me think through how I craft my stories. And then, yet, when I'm writing, and I'm curious to hear how you write, I tend to see it in my head as a movie, and I tend to be looking at it as though I'm placing a camera, and I'm figuring out who to put the camera on and what scenes. And a lot of times I'm a discovery writer too. I start out, I have no idea, other than like thinking of a film structure, I have no idea where I'm really going. I like the characters to kind of let me know where they want to go. And which is scary because sometimes, something happens and I'm like, oh, how are we going to get out of
Yeah.
this one? But yeah, essentially, like I do see things as a movie, which is also why my books tend to be very short,
Hmm.
because you're trained as a screenwriter to cut out all the fat, right? There's no, every page is like a minute, and you've got to make sure that you're on time. And so I tend to think of my novels that way, which some people have actually said like, "Hey, we'd love to see like a little more. Like it'd be great if you could actually make them a little
Yeah.
longer."
I actually write in a very similar way because I put down my beats and like you said, discoveries, sometimes they'll reveal something to me, but I'm very like edited in the way that I write, and sometimes that kind of condenses it. And of course when you go through edits you're going to like add more stuff to beef it and make it a little more immersive to the reader. But I've never talked to anybody about that has like such a similar way of writing as I do. Because all of my friends they overwrite, and I'm like, how? I can't do that. But yeah, I write cinematically as well, and I think that's why I love audiobooks. Um,
Mm.
and I know as a self-published author, it's not the easiest thing to do an audiobook. Um, and I didn't. This wasn't a question that I kind of included beforehand, but do you ever see any of your books coming into audio?
So yeah, and actually I wish I'd sent this link to you ahead of time, but so I because of my video producer background, I did produce my first book, Weird Space, as an audiobook.
Oh,
And I
good to
did
know.
it as I did it as an immersive, and it's actually on YouTube. It's free. I put it up there for anybody to access. But I did it as an immersive experience. So
Mhm.
just like you're talking about with the cinematic feel, is that
Yes.
I knew, okay, I can't make a movie, but I can do an audiobook and I can put in a soundtrack and I can add sound effects and I can do the voices the way that I want. So I narrate the book and I would wake up at 4 in the morning, for several months. And when my voice was deep, I hadn't had my coffee yet. And and everybody's quiet, right? I have 3 kids, my wife's working, so the house is crazy. But so I would get up before anyone else would be awake and I would get a good hour of recording in. And then sometime later, I would get it into an editing software and I would cut all of my mess ups out, and then layer in all the soundtracks. I mean, I had the best time. I was so tired. I've never been more tired in my life than trying to work full time and be a husband and dad and produce this
Yeah.
audiobook. But I can tell you it's like the most fun I've ever had because it brought together my love of film with my love of writing with a story that just means a lot to me. So I'll send that to you. But if anybody's looking for a Weird Space on YouTube, it's like I said, it's there. I just wanted people to be able to listen to it.
I love
Um,
that. Yeah,
you
I'm
know.
glad we talked about that. I'll definitely be checking that out. Let's get into Fang Gloria then. So, I'm gonna do a quick, like blurb for it, in case anybody is not familiar with the book. For those who don't know, the Night Stalker news team make their living chasing the supernatural and exposing the world's strangest horrors. When they receive a desperate letter from a small town teen claiming she's turning into a vampire, they expect another hoax. What they find instead plunges them into a world of secrets and shadowy forces. Who is Gloria? A terrified girl begging to be saved, or a monster waiting to rise? With that being said, what inspired you to write this story?
Yeah, my middle son, who's 14, I have a book that isn't technically the first book of this series, but it is like a prequel of sorts called The Heart Taker. And that I wrote that book back in 2007 and put it on a shelf,
Oh,
and then my
wow.
wife encouraged, yeah, it was there, well, a shelf digitally.
Yeah.
My wife encouraged me later to rewrite it and publish it. And then my middle son out of nowhere kind of latched onto it and started he read it like 3 times, and I remember telling him like, you don't have to read it for me, and he's like, no, 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 I there's something about it that really resonates with me. And then by the time he finished it the third time, he's like, you need to write a sequel, or we need to do something with this. So we just started sitting around and talking about it and having so much fun, and I thought, okay, this is a great connection with my son, right? We can just talk about this. This is such a joy. But all of a sudden, a story started to bloom, and it ended up combining with an idea that an actual story I'd heard at one point about a young woman who had become addicted to drugs, and I guess she was dating the drug dealer and was around with his friends, and her family, as a way to protect her, like barricaded her in the home one day with a bunch of other family friends. But then all of the drug dealers show up and they're trying to coax her out of the house while everyone else is trying to keep her in. And I thought, well, that's kind of a strange story, but what if she was not on drugs but she was becoming a vampire, and what if it was the vampires who were trying to coax her out of the house, and the people in the house, in this case, are the Night Stalker news team, and they're trying to figure out how to keep her from fully turning. And at the same time, she's in this place where, should she choose to become this beautiful vampire, or and lose her soul, or can she step back from all of that temptation and everything that she feels she wants? And so I just became really interested in that crisis that somebody might have, and also who are these people that would help her. And the tension in the story is also that as she's changing, she's becoming dangerous and she's becoming unpredictable. So they don't know when and if she's going to turn on them. And the vampires they desire her and they're doing everything they can. And there's a clock ticking too. If they don't turn her by this evening in the story, then, all hell's going to break loose, literally. So, you kind of have this cliff, and everybody racing to try to win her back. It's a tug of war. And I just thought that was really a compelling, kind of fun idea. Plus, I love monsters. I love, just I'm just a fan of like classic horror. I grew up on Stephen King, and so I wanted to write a series that would give me the excuse to write a whole series of monster stories in my own kind of fun, crazy way. So this Night Stalker series is kind of a way to do that, and this was a fun way to kick it off.
Yeah, I love how I love asking that question first of all because it can be something so, like so random that it inspires us to say what if and like turn some type of situation that we've heard into on its head or incorporate a supernatural element or something like that. And I love vampires. Okay, like I'm a vampire nerd. I don't see a lot of vampire fiction where it's like the clock is ticking for them to either like make a choice or for them to be pulled to either side. It's usually like you're turned into a vampire and that's what it is. Of course I haven't read it yet, but it sounds like she's battling with this and she has time to go either way, and so I like that.
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah, it's really a struggle, and I didn't want it to just be an automatic, like, vampires terrible, people good. It's like there is this sense in which even the vampires, you start to learn about them and their motivation, and you kind of, there's some twists even with who they are and what they're doing. And then Gloria, of course, you find out there's a lot more going on with her, right? She's not just a damsel in distress. She really is someone who's got to either claw her way back from hell or take the plunge. And at different points in the story, I wanted it to feel like, man, it's not worth it to claw your way back. Like, you might just have to take the plunge. And like I said, I mean, I tend to like my characters I like to have them tell me, after a while what they're doing, where they want to go. And when I get in the zone, which is my favorite place to be, I don't know how you feel about that. Like, when you have that experience where you're just like, I'm so in this that the story's just going.
Mm-hmm.
And I often felt that with Gloria, that she was kind of saying, this is really hard. I might actually I might drop off. And so by the end of the story, I didn't know what decision she was going to make. And I didn't know if the other characters were actually going to make it out. So I was writing, waiting to see what would happen,
So
as
you
much as I'm
didn't
hoping that readers will.
you didn't know the ending, right? Until you got
No,
closer to there. Okay, so I write the same way. Yeah,
that's awesome.
and I think it's exciting because, and as a reader, it can go any way. It's not predictable. Maybe when you're coming at that point of like not knowing how your story is going to end, and the reader feels the same way. So,
Yeah.
and your point about monsters, I I feel like I mostly read anything that's supernatural or has monsters. And I know that you're a big movie buff. You have a Ghostbusters shirt on right now. Like, if we look at your profile, we just know you are. And it's something that I noticed because I'm actually reading Heart Taker right now. I'm on chapter 11.
That's awesome.
Is that you include movie quotes in your chapter headings. Do you do that for all your books or just for Heart Taker?
I just did that for Heart Taker. I wanted to do it for Fang Gloria, but I got a little spooked recently because I think there's some questions around copyright that I'm still exploring. But I've been a little more cautious about how I do that because you're right. Like, so much of my influence comes from movies. I grew up in a house where my parents were like just constantly either reading to us or we were watching movies together from all different eras. Constantly had records playing, so it was just like you were just surrounded by this incredible amalgam of pop culture and art, and so like I can't separate from that. It's just infused in everything. So yeah, so that is an important part. I wanted to do it. I don't know. I
Yeah,
still have
I
to
feel
figure
you.
that out.
Yeah, it's one of those things that some people are just like, oh, they would rather play more safe than sorry. But also, like, in epigraphs, we have pull quotes all the time from like other books and different forms of
Right.
media. So I think it's just, it depends on how you feel. But I knew because on chapter 2 of Heart Taker, you referenced Janice Ian from Mean Girls, and I knew immediately that I was going to love this book.
Oh,
It was that there are two kinds of evil people in this world: those who do evil things and those who see evil things and don't try to stop it. And I thought that that was such a good. But to reference back to monsters and the whole inspiration from film, Do you have any like a favorite creature feature film?
100%. They're some of my favorites. So right off the bat, I would say Tremors. I think it's 1990.
The worms, right? The
One of
big
my
worms.
The
There's
big
that.
worms in the desert. Like I'm actually so one of the Night Stalker books is going to be called I think I'm gonna call it Dust Devils, and it's gonna have a similar feel to Tremors, kind of an homage. But so Tremors, The Thing, the John Carpenter version. I mean, obviously Alien and Jaws. I mean, I could pretty much go on. I'm a big practical effects guy. I love 1980s, 1990s. I love in camera effects where the the filmmakers really had to, they couldn't cheat, they had to do everything, that everything you're seeing they're having to make and and move and do all, and so I absolutely, yeah, I love those, but those are some of my top.
I think one of my favorite ones, because you're talking about the practical effects, is I think it's called Werewolf in London, right? Is that what it's
Yeah,
called?
American Werewolf in
Yeah, American
London,
Werewolf
like
in London. That one, that transformation scene was like one of the best practical effects that I think I've ever seen.
it's
And
incredible.
I missed that from the 80s, and I didn't live in the 80s. I was born in 94, but you can appreciate um, film from the 80s. And
Oh my gosh, yeah.
yeah, it's
Especially with Stranger Things now, and like there is this resurgence even to the 90s. Like I feel like people, I think, and my kids who are teenagers really kind of pine for this whole thing they never experienced, where they're like, wow, what would it have been like without phones? What would it have been like without being like consumed by these devices that have so much good about them, but also like kind of remove all of the boring little moments where you do find yourself in adventures and you do let your mind wander. Like all of that's kind of been removed now. And so, yeah, I find, not to go off on a tangent, but like I do find that like it is funny how even the younger generation is like really kind of longing for that.
yeah, yeah. It does have a certain draw to it because it's just, I don't know, very authentic and present. And something about your books that kind of goes hand in hand with that is I feel it's like it's kids in the 80s doing things. Like, like this, like you referenced Stranger Things. It's like kids in the 80s riding bicycles or just like whatever. And you're getting into these fun little like situations that they have to find their way out of. And I really appreciate that. And it does, like, I've never, crucify me, but I've never read anything from Stephen King. Um,
No,
but
that's totally fine.
yeah, I've watched the movies, of course, because he has so many film adaptations. Um, but I would assign your stuff, like, obviously, like next to his. And I'm sure you probably get a lot of readers like that are interested in maybe his work too. Do you ever have anybody drawing those parallels?
Yeah, so I get two parallels, which is Steven Spielberg and Stephen King, which are both an incredible honor. Although what's funny is I'm right there with you. Like Stephen King is by no means my favorite author. He's just seems like one of these, one of these authors that, yeah, his books are everywhere, so
Yeah.
you read them. But they do get comparisons a lot to those. But what's funny is that my largest inspirations for all of the books, whether it's Fang Gloria or Weird Space, come from like portal fantasies where you did have kids forced to go on adventures like Peter Pan, Chronicles of Narnia, the Wrinkle in Time series, where it's it goes beyond even kids on bikes, like that trope, to kids that are in the real world but then are forced to take on adult responsibilities where there are no adults to help them,
Hmm.
and they're in the real world but like magical things are happening or fantastical things are happening, and so that Spielbergian element, right? Like E.T., where Elliot is experiencing his parents' divorce and all of these difficult things in life, but then this magical thing happens and he's left to like deal with it and cope with it and protect, E.T. and all of these things. And I fell in love with that because that's how I felt as a kid, is like always wondering, oh my gosh, what would happen? What would I do if all the adults in my neighborhood disappeared and it was up to us kids to go figure everything out? And so every story I write, whether it's horror or sci-fi fantasy or kind of it always has, I always love that coming of age core.
Hmm.
Because I think it also at heart, we're all kids. Like we might be adults. I might look like I'm an adult, but I still very much feel like a kid a lot of the time. Like, gosh, what's going to happen? Or just feeling very uncertain. And so I tend to want to write for people who are adults, but who like looking back at childhood, or who who are always kind of trying to process what did that all mean? What was my childhood all about? You know, and so that tends to be, if you look hard enough, that tends to be what I'm doing in the background, even though there's like a genre, veneer. I'm always working out my own childhood, right?
Yeah.
In those stories.
Thank you for sharing that. Like I write in a similar way, but more for adult females. And so it is like, well, this
That's
situation
awesome.
happened. Let's incorporate a fantastical element to find our way out of this and kind of like reflect and see like who are we really down deep. And it's so important for kids because you talked about kids finding their way out of this fantastical situation in the midst of something bad happening. And just like adults, kids need that form of escapism too. And I'm not a person that reads a lot of YA because I don't like, it's hard for me to read something if it's juvenile, but your writing is not juvenile. And so I love the YA that you offer. And I think it's
No,
important.
thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And it actually makes it really hard to market because, like, Weird Space, people assumed because it was like 12-year-olds in the story that this must be like YA or even middle grade. In fact, when I was submitting it, I did at one point submit it to agents. I would get a lot of comments like, hey, you need to cut this book by 20,000 words because it's middle grade and it can't be any more than 40,000 words and it probably should be a graphic novel. And I'm like, but what I struggle with is that because I'm writing mostly for adults, it's like the kids might be at the core, but like kind of like a movie like Stand By Me or even like Robert McCammon's A Boy's Life, like you read these and you realize they're actually very adult books in the sense of the danger and the responsibility and the adventure and kind of what's being worked out, but it's being worked out through the perspective of these kids. And so I people have been confused about how to approach these books that I write because it isn't really, I'm not really writing as much for a YA audience as much as I am writing for people for whom that would appeal to,
Yeah.
that want to find that doorway.
And I think it
And
translates well. Like I look at it and I don't
oh,
assume that it's for teenagers or for kids. I think
mm,
it's very much for adult readers and teenagers too. Like it meets
oh,
a
that's awesome.
really good criteria. And Stranger Things has like such a huge adult cult following. And
Right.
it's something for families to connect on too. I think very seldomly do we find books, or maybe I'm just not looking for them, books that maybe parents and teenagers can read together.
See, okay, so you just hit on something. That's exactly what I'm going for. I want the book to read like a family 80s popcorn film where like the entire family could go and mom and dad are laughing over here while the kids are getting something entirely different at this level. And at the end, they can talk about it and it becomes like a family favorite, right? Some of the greatest feedback that I've ever gotten is from parents who are like, I read this with my kid or I listened to the audiobook with my kid on a car trip. And like we both talked about, because there's a very important father son dynamic in Weird Space. There's a very important father daughter dynamic in Fang Gloria. And it's like I'm always working out the parent child relationship. And I tend to hear back from readers of kids and adults who say, "Yeah, this really resonated with me. I was able to talk to my parent. I was able to talk to my kid, and ask them like, do you feel this way?" Like, it's helping make connections that I never even thought about before. And that is, I'm sure you've experienced this too. It's like as an author, that's like one of the greatest gifts is when you hear back from a reader and they reveal something to you from the story and you're like, I didn't do that. Like that's you bringing it to the story and like you realize that your own story isn't even complete and it's not even yours. It is a part of other people who then read it and they bring their ideas and imagination, their feelings, their past, their hurt, their wounds, like they bring all of that and then they make it their own. And that is such a great gift. And then I think my only job as an author is to get myself out of the way enough for them to do that. So like write a story that doesn't distract them or like lie to them or push an agenda, just gives them that space to live in and to think through those things, right? Like that's kind of what I'm seeing more and more is like my role, but to ultimately like get out of the way. And it's like, here, take this to your world, make it yours. And it again, it's one of the greatest gifts when people come back to you with that.
Yeah, it is very much, I heard multiple people say that you write a book and then, it's yours while you're writing it. And when you release it into the world, it doesn't belong to you anymore. And people are
Yeah.
perceive it and take away from it what they will. And it is really cool. You're right. Whenever people pull different things from it, because you're sitting here writing like a maybe like a 70,000 word novel, and it's a complete world in this character, and so there's so many different things happening that you might not even fully latch onto, but the reader will. And so yeah, I like that observation. And it is cool whenever you're affirmed by a reader that they understood what it was that you were trying to translate.
It's amazing. You're right. It's there is. I'm actually sad for people who don't write because, and I know like this podcast is like a lot of writers are are listening to this, so we all know like it's such a sad thing for me for people who don't write and they never get that experience to know what it feels like to hear that from somebody and to actually like Stephen King calls it like almost like telepathy, where you are having a meeting of the minds at a different space and time, and you're sharing the same thoughts and going through the same adventure. I don't. There's so much magic around writing and storytelling, and I just feel bad for people who don't get to experience that.
Yeah, it is. It's like finding a best friend who just like understands
Totally.
you on every level in a way. So I think that's all the questions that I had for you. Was there anything that you wanted to share?
Yeah, so I would just share one more thing, which is you asked, and this ties back to something you said earlier, is that I think you had mentioned like something that gives me joy was something you had
Oh
sent me,
yes.
and I love that question, and I also it ties back to what you said about like encouraging, especially encouraging children to read. So one of the things that's given me the greatest amount of joy recently is that I'm starting to be invited to come speak at schools. And at first it was my two of my son's high school, actually my wife's a high school teacher, so I was invited to go speak at their school, to a writing class. And I'm going to actually a school Monday morning to speak to a few classes. And I'll tell you what, it's like when you walk into a classroom, there is this preconceived idea that kids don't care anymore. It's like, why? They have endless scrolling, they've got endless amounts of distraction. Why would they care about books, especially books from somebody that they don't know anything about? But when you start talking to them, you suddenly see these eyes kind of light up. And like I found that when I'm able to just share my heart and share where these stories are really coming from and share that I care about them, the kids like that I'm talking to, that I want them to have these experiences, that I want them to be able to dive into these books and see and live different lives and walk in different people's shoes and experience that kind of magic. You see them really respond, and I've just been so encouraged. I have so much hope for these next generations that I think there is going to be a real resurgence back to reading, and that books are going to play a really important role, in terms of grounding people and helping people kind of get their heads out of the crazy and the noise and into something that just lets you focus, lets you get quiet, lets you get into your own imagination. Like I don't know. I'm seeing that more and more with students. And that has been an incredible joy. So, yeah, just something I
Yeah.
wanted to share because I'm really encouraged.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. I think it's important to remember things that bring us joy, especially in our current climate. And I think that you're right about seeing like a resurgence of literacy, because when I was a teenager, but I also grew up in the South, and just like reading for entertainment wasn't really encouraged, at least in my family or like where I grew up. It wasn't cool in the 2000s. And so I read the Twilight series, and then I read some Nicholas Sparks, and then I didn't pick up another book again until I was like 27 years old. Between 19 and 27, I did not read.
Yeah.
And now it's cool again to read
Right.
books and to be smart. But yeah, I'm glad that you recognize that, because I think like people kind of like don't really give a lot of credit to younger generations because of social media and things like that. But they're still kids just like anyone else was, and they have brains that are forming and working, and they're smart kids, and they just need to be given a chance. And so thank you for like showing up for them. That's really
Oh,
special and cool that you're doing that.
oh, it's so much. I mean, again, it's such a joy, and if I could just do that and write, I'd be the
Happy.
happiest person. Like
Yeah.
it's so much fun to talk to, but you get to talk about what you love, and you get to see people really respond to that. I mean, it's just like what's better than that, right?
Yeah. Well, Thank you again for joining, and I don't want to
Oh,
take up too much of your time because it is getting pretty late over there. But yeah,
no, thank you.
we'll be in touch for sure. And congratulations on your next release, or not
Awesome,
your
Emily.
next
Well,
release, but your recent release and your next one because I do know that you
no.
have more books coming. But
Oh, absolutely. No, thank you so much. Again, this was wonderful.
yeah, of course, I appreciate you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can go check out A.M Wiley's books at Weird Space Books. That is his social media handle. Fang Gloria is out everywhere, and I hope you guys check him out because I am absolutely in love with the universe that he created.